All right. So today, we're going to be diving into something I think everybody kind of has to deal with at some point, right?
Yeah.
When life throws a curveball, throws a wrench in your plans.
Mm-hmm.
We're talking about pivoting, and not the kind you see on the basketball court.
Right.
So we're looking at this book, The Power of the Pivot,
Yeah.
and it's all about how to take those curveballs and actually use them to gain momentum. What if I told you those setbacks you're facing, those frustrating setbacks, were actually opportunities, secret opportunities?
It's a powerful shift in thinking, isn't it?
Yeah,
The world is full of disruptions,
it is.
no matter how well we plan.
Yeah,
But instead of fearing those disruptions, we can learn to navigate them.
exactly.
Well,
And get this, even those mega companies we all admire, right?
yeah.
They're masters at pivoting.
Mm-hmm.
This book, The Power of the Pivot, gives the example of a tech giant we all know and love.
Right.
And they were initially focused on hardware, but a competitor came out of nowhere and basically ate their lunch.
Yeah.
Right?
It happens.
And instead of doubling down on what wasn't working, they took a hard look at their strengths and realized, you know what? We have this massive advantage in software.
Mm-hmm.
That pivot led to them dominating the market, even though they were almost knocked out of the game entirely.
Right. And that's a common thread that we see throughout the book, and I think through a lot of success stories, is the ability to adapt and change when maybe the initial plan isn't working.
Yeah, it's like they took a potential knockout punch and they turned it into a winning strategy.
Exactly.
So how do we mere mortals apply this to our own lives?
The source emphasizes that it starts with acknowledging the roller coaster.
Okay.
Change is inevitable. Sometimes it feels like we're strapped in for a wild ride.
We are. But that's okay.
Yeah.
It's part of the journey.
I'm strapped in. So tell me about these elite strategies this book talks about.
One of the most powerful is go wide, not deep. Think of it this way. You're lost in the woods.
Hyper-focused on finding a specific trail marker. You might miss the wider path that leads out of the forest altogether.
Okay, so you're saying when things go wrong, it's about taking a step back and looking at the bigger picture.
Exactly.
Uh-huh.
Instead of getting bogged down in the details of what went wrong, ask yourself, what was I really trying to achieve?
Yeah.
What is the ultimate destination?
Mm.
Maybe there's a completely different path that gets you there faster and more effectively.
I like that.
Yeah.
So think about it. Think about a recent setback you faced.
Mm-hmm.
If you zoom out and look at the bigger picture, what new insights emerge?
Yeah.
It's like realizing your failure, quote unquote failure, was just a detour onto a more scenic route.
Right. And the source shares this incredible anecdote about a company that was struggling to sell luxury watches.
Okay.
They were laser focused on their product,
Yeah.
but sales were flatlining. And then they stumbled upon a blog post written by one of their customers.
Oh, really? What did the blog post say?
This customer wasn't raving about the watch itself.
Mm-hmm.
He was obsessed with the beautifully designed watch box it came in.
Oh.
He even repurposed it to store other valuables.
So they completely missed the mark on what their customer actually valued. Talk about not seeing the forest for the trees.
Yeah, and this is where the go-wide strategy comes in.
Okay.
They realized they were so fixated on being a luxury watch brand that they overlooked a potentially huge market for high-end storage solutions.
Interesting.
They pivoted, launched a line of luxury boxes, and their business exploded.
That's wild. That's a perfect example of how a simple shift in perspective can reveal these hidden opportunities, right?
Absolutely.
It makes me think, are we all missing potential watch boxes in our own lives? What are we so focused on that we're overlooking something valuable right under our noses?
It's a question worth asking ourselves, that's for sure.
Hmm.
And that brings us to another powerful strategy. Data speaks, so listen.
Okay, this one sounds intriguing. Is this about becoming a data nerd?
Ah.
Because spreadsheets aren't really my thing.
It's not about crunching numbers all day.
Okay.
It's about recognizing that every setback, every obstacle, every so-called failure is a data point.
Okay.
It's feedback waiting to be decoded.
So it's like those video games where you learn from each mistake and get better with every try.
Exactly. Think of it this way. The Power of the Pivot mentions a company struggling to sell a new product.
All right.
They were convinced it was a winner, but the market just wasn't responding.
Oh, I've been there. It's so easy to get emotionally attached to an idea and miss those red flags.
Right. And this company, instead of ignoring the warning signs, dug deep into the data.
Okay.
They analyzed customer reviews, surveyed their target audience, and scrutinized their marketing campaigns.
What did they discover? Did they find the secret sauce?
What they discovered was even more valuable. They found out that while their product was good, it was solving the wrong problem.
Boo.
Customers didn't need another gadget. They needed a service that simplified their lives.
So they were blinded by their product and missed the actual need they could be fulfilling.
Exactly. So they pivoted from selling a physical product to offering a subscription service that solved the real problem. And guess what?
What?
Their business went through the roof.
Wow.
It's like they were trying to sell ice to Eskimos when what people really wanted was a warm coat.
Okay, that's a light bulb moment for me. It's not just about being data-driven, it's about being problem-focused.
Mm.
That data helps you identify the right problem to solve.
That's a brilliant insight. Sometimes we're so focused on our solution that we forget to really understand the problem. Data speaks, so listen, is about taking the emotion out of the equation and letting the facts guide your decisions.
Okay, so we talked about zooming out, listening to the data. What's the next strategy in our pivot playbook?
This one is my personal favorite. Experiment with reckless curiosity. Now, I know the word reckless might sound a bit intimidating.
Reckless, I'm already picturing myself jumping out of planes.
Not quite. But it does involve a willingness to step outside your comfort zone and embrace a spirit of experimentation.
Okay, I'm starting to see the appeal here. Tell me more about this reckless curiosity.
It's about approaching challenges with a sense of playfulness, almost like a scientist in a lab. The power of the pivot really emphasizes that true innovation often happens when we're willing to try things that might seem a little crazy at first.
Okay, I'm starting to see how that reckless fits in.
Yeah.
It's about that willingness to try, even if you're not sure it's going to work.
Exactly. Think of it like this. You're trying to create a new recipe.
Okay.
If you follow the same recipe every time, you'll always get the same result.
Right.
But if you start throwing in unexpected ingredients, experimenting with different flavors, you might just stumble upon a culinary masterpiece.
I love that analogy. So it's about breaking free from the tried and true and embracing the unknown.
Mm-hmm.
But how do we know which experiments are worth trying? It can't be just random chaos, right?
Right. There's a method to the madness.
Yeah.
The power of the pivot suggests using a framework called the pivot cycle.
Okay.
It starts with identifying your desired outcome. Where do you want to end up?
Okay.
Then you brainstorm a bunch of different experiments that could potentially get you there.
So it's like having a roadmap with multiple routes,
Yeah.
and you're trying out different paths to see which one leads to the destination.
That's a great way to put it. And here's the key. You run these experiments in small, controlled ways.
Okay.
You don't have to bet the farm on every idea.
Right.
You test, you gather data, and you iterate based on what you learn.
So it's like dipping your toes in the water before jumping in head first.
Exactly.
Test the waters before going all in.
Exactly. And that's where the reckless curiosity comes in.
Okay.
You're not afraid to try things that might seem unconventional or even a little bit risky.
Yeah.
You're driven by that insatiable desire to discover what works, even if it means failing along the way.
This is making me think of all those successful companies that started as something completely different. Like, wasn't YouTube originally supposed to be a dating site?
You're exactly right.
Yeah.
And there are countless other examples.
Wow.
The point is, if those companies hadn't been willing to experiment, to pivot when things weren't working, they wouldn't be where they are today.
That's true. So this experiment with reckless curiosity strategy, it's like giving ourselves permission to play, to be creative, to embrace the unexpected.
Yeah.
It's about shifting our mindset from fear of failure to excitement for discovery.
That's a great way to summarize it. Now let's talk about the next phase of the pivot cycle. Data speaks. So listen, which we touched on earlier, this is where you analyze the results of your experiments.
Okay. So we've run our experiments, gathered our data. Now it's time to decipher what it all means.
Mhm.
This is where things get really interesting, right?
Absolutely. Remember that company that was struggling to sell their gadget?
Yeah.
They used data to uncover the real problem they needed to solve. That's the power of paying attention to the feedback, both the positive and the negative.
Yeah.
It can reveal patterns and insights that you might have missed otherwise.
So we're not just looking at what worked and what didn't. We're trying to understand the why behind those results. It's about extracting those valuable lessons from each experiment, even the ones that didn't go as planned.
Precisely. And sometimes the most valuable insights come from the experiments that quote-unquote failed.
Right.
Those failures can illuminate blind spots, challenge assumptions, and ultimately lead to even more innovative solutions.
It's like Thomas Edison famously said, "I haven't failed, I've just found 10,000 ways that won't work."
Right.
Each failure is a stepping stone on the path to success.
That's a great quote. And it highlights the importance of having a growth mindset of viewing setbacks as opportunities for learning and improvement. It's about embracing the journey even with its twists and turns.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So to recap, we've talked about going wide, listening to the data, and experimenting with reckless curiosity.
Yeah.
These strategies are like tools in our pivot toolbox,
Yeah.
helping us navigate those unexpected detours and even discover hidden treasures along the way.
Exactly. And remember, the pivot cycle is iterative.
Okay.
You might go through multiple rounds of experimenting, analyzing data, and refining your approach.
Right.
It's about constantly learning and adapting, becoming more agile and resilient with each pivot.
So we're not just pivoting once we're building a pivot muscle that allows us to navigate change with more confidence and grace.
Hmm.
This is starting to feel less like a reaction to setbacks and more like a proactive approach to shaping our own destiny.
That's a great way to put it. And that brings us to a crucial point, finding opportunity in the rubble.
Yeah.
It's about recognizing that within every challenge, within every setback, lies the potential for something new, something better.
Okay, I love that phrase, finding opportunity in the rubble.
Yeah.
It's like those disaster movies where they find a survivor amidst the chaos.
Mhm.
But in this case, we're not just surviving, we're thriving.
Exactly. And the power of the pivot shares a powerful example of this. It tells the story of a company that was on the brink of bankruptcy.
Oh, wow.
Their flagship product, which they had invested heavily in, was a complete flop.
Um,
They were facing mounting debt, dwindling morale, and the very real possibility of having to shut down.
That sounds like a nightmare scenario. What did they do? Did they manage to pull themselves out of that tailspin?
They did. And they did it by applying the principles we've been talking about.
Okay.
They went wide, they listened to the data, and they experimented with reckless curiosity. They realized that while their main product had failed, they had inadvertently developed a unique technology in the process.
So even in the midst of what seemed like a complete disaster, they found a hidden gem. That's incredible.
It is, and it highlights a crucial point. Sometimes what we perceive as a catastrophic failure is actually a stepping stone to something even greater. It's about having the courage to look beyond the immediate rubble and see the potential for something new to emerge.
This is giving me goosebumps. So they found this hidden technology, but what did they do with it? Did they manage to turn things around? So they took that technology and instead of trying to force it into their old business model, right? They asked themselves, what else can we do with this?
Yeah, they realized that their technology had applications in a completely different industry. One that was booming at the time. It
Interesting.
was a risky move,
Hmm.
but they were desperate.
Yeah.
They had nothing left to lose.
So they took a leap of faith, trusting their instincts and the potential of this new discovery. What happened? Did this gamble pay off?
It did. They pivoted, shifted their focus, and entered this new market with a product that perfectly met a growing demand. It was as if their failure had set them on a collision course with success in a field they never would have considered otherwise.
Wow, that's so inspiring. It's like the universe was nudging them in the right direction all along, even though it felt like everything was falling apart at the time.
Right. It's a powerful reminder that sometimes the greatest opportunities are born out of our biggest setbacks.
It is.
It's about having the courage to see past the rubble and recognize the potential that lies within the wreckage.
Okay, but let's be real. This finding opportunity in the rubble thing sounds great in theory,
Yeah.
but it can't be easy to do in the heat of the moment, right? When you're like really in it.
You're absolutely right. It's one thing to understand the concept,
Mm-hmm.
but it's quite another to put it into practice when you're feeling overwhelmed, discouraged, or even downright defeated.
Yeah. So how do we cultivate this like pivot mindset? How do we train ourselves to see those hidden gems when all we feel is the weight of the rubble?
The power of the pivot talks about developing a resilience ritual.
Okay.
It's not about ignoring the negative emotions that come with setbacks. It's about acknowledging them, processing them, and then intentionally shifting your focus toward possibilities.
So it's like taking a moment to mourn the loss, to
Yeah.
acknowledge the disappointment, and then choosing to move forward with a sense of purpose and optimism.
Exactly. And everyone's resilience ritual will be different. It could be something as simple as taking a walk in nature, meditating, journaling, or talking to a trusted friend or mentor.
Yeah. The key is to find what helps you kind of reset your emotional state and shift your perspective. It's about giving yourself permission to grieve the loss, but then choosing to focus on the opportunity that lies ahead.
Precisely. And as you practice this ritual, you'll find that you become more resilient, more adaptable, and better equipped to navigate those inevitable ups and downs that life throws our way.
So, we've covered a lot of ground today. We've explored the power of pivoting, delved into elite strategies, and even learned how to find opportunity in the rubble. But before we wrap up, I want to circle back to the listener.
It all comes back to the individual, doesn't it?
It does. The power of the pivot ultimately lies within each of us.
Yeah.
So, to our listener, I want to leave you with this thought. What's that wall you've been hitting in your own life?
Hmm.
What if that wall isn't a dead end, but a doorway leading to something even greater than you imagined? What if it's time for you to pivot? And remember, pivoting isn't just a reaction. It's a skill, a mindset, a superpower that you can develop. Embrace the unexpected, trust the process, and be open to those amazing possibilities that await when you master the art of the pivot.
Awesome. Well, thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We'll see you next time, ready to explore another fascinating topic and uncover those hidden gems of knowledge together.